Okay, today I'm at Lingfield with Hayley Moore. Thanks very much for agreeing to talk to us, Hayley. First, we go straight into your past. You were born into a racing family. So how was that growing up surrounded by horses and racing, etc.?
It was a real pleasure, actually. I was lucky enough to spend a lot of time around my grandfather, who trained in Brighton, where I grew up. And it was lovely because my nan was very involved, Lorna. She was always doing the feeds. My mum would be riding out. My dad would be there eventually. He had that stint training up in Epsom to begin with, so never got to see him that much when we were really young, but it was great because we spent a lot of time with my nan and granddad, and they were a lot of fun. My granddad was a real character. He'd always be singing around the yard, telling jokes. He was just a larger than life person, and being around him, incredibly grateful. We always had ponies amongst all the race horses. I think actually we ended up having about 5 ponies between 4 kids, so we were certainly well spoiled. And my granddad would always come back from some race meeting and he'd be like, "Oh, we've got you a new pony," and it would need breaking in probably, and it would certainly need to be starting from scratch. So I wouldn't say we were spoilt with ready-made show jumping ponies, but it certainly, I think, taught Ryan to ride when he'd have to break them in from quite a young age. So it was a lot of fun. My 2 older brothers, Ryan and Jamie, would always have all sorts of arguments because we'd have to go and muck out our ponies. It taught us a lot about responsibilities, but it was a great upbringing, actually. Very carefree. Our parents would sort of leave us to head off to the yard there. See my nan, she'd always spoil us with some chocolate, and see my granddad. My granddad was quite a stern character, so I think he disciplined us all and certainly kept us on the straight, because you couldn't get away with anything. He was a man that certainly enlisted hard work into you, but it was a great opportunity being around the horses. We learned so much from a young age. Lucky that we had our own ponies as well, so it was great, just the great outdoors and being involved with horses from a very young age, and incredibly grateful for that.
You can tell by your enthusiasm in your voice it's obviously something real, something you really enjoy. I might be surprised to learn that I read somewhere that your father Gary tried to put you off following in this sort of business.
Yeah, my dad obviously started off being a jockey himself, and he was very much a journeyman jockey. Apparently he rode very well. I was too young, obviously, to make a judgment on that. So he rode, and I think he found it very tough. So I don't think he ever really pushed any of us into being jockeys, to be honest with you. Ryan was very much the start of his career, being educated, doing his A-levels, was into his football, did a little bit of amateur riding, and then ended up being incredibly talented. Jamie always had the mindset he was definitely going to be a jump jockey, as was Josh. But for myself, I think it was, even in the last 20 years or so, things have changed a lot for women and being jockeys. And his sister, my auntie Candy, she'd had some nasty falls as well, and she'd come out of it intensive cares from nasty jump incidents. So I think when you have a daughter, you kind of think, right, I'm never going to let her go and do that. So it was very much, you can go and be a flat jockey, enjoy it, but you'll do your education. It's not really a career that's very straightforward for females. And he made sure that I was going to just be a flat jockey as an amateur. So he was very supportive when I started out. Obviously got me going. I'd had lots of experience of riding around Brighton Racetrack, where I had my first ride, and I felt as I was very ready to go out when I did go out. But yeah, he certainly, he wasn't encouraging it, but I think, to be fair, it was the right move to do. I think you've got to be hugely talented to make a good living as a female jockey. But things have changed a lot, even from when I started riding, just 15 years ago.
So there was never any real doubt in your own mind that you would be doing it in some sort of capacity?
No, I always felt as though I'd definitely do it. I suppose when you've got 2 older brothers that have naturally gone into it, been amateurs, and then made professional careers out of it, for me it was always a case of go and be an amateur and then do it alongside something else, but it wouldn't be my career path and the way that I would sort of be what I'd be doing for my whole life.
So has having a high-profile racing family been a help, or has it been added pressure to you as you pursued your own career?
I think it's been a massive help. I think obviously people know who I am because of my father, because of my brother. So I guess they know where I'm coming from and what kind of background and upbringing I have, and I think it's definitely helped me get to certain places in my career.
You talked about growing up with your brothers. Was there an awful lot of sibling rivalry back when you were children?
Yeah, when we would be competing on our ponies, we'd always want to beat one another. But I think we've always been incredibly supportive of one another. We wouldn't be. I know you sometimes see a lot of families sort of bickering or not wanting their brother to do better or worse than them, but I think we've always just been pleased for one another. Ryan's obviously been incredibly successful, and I think that we all just are absolutely delighted, and I wouldn't say there'd ever be jealousy or rivalry. He's, I think, pretty unique and a standout, and then the two boys are jump jockeys and they've got very successful careers as well. I think Josh is a lovely rider, very different from Jamie, but they're both hugely successful jump jockeys, and I couldn't think of anything better than watching them ride winners.
You mentioned earlier that you were involved with show jumping as kids. Would you say that was something that you might have considered as a career professionally?
Not really, no. I think we understood it was incredibly expensive, a very expensive sport to get into, and you've got to have, I think, a huge talent as a show jumper to make it, and it's a lot of hard work, which obviously horse racing is as well. But I don't know, I suppose we were being brought up in a horse racing yard. That was more our passion, and I continued as a teenager with my younger brother Josh. We did eventing up until we were a bit older, but the two older boys, they did a bit of show jumping. They were very keen to get on and ride the race horses, and they actually gave up the show jumping a lot earlier than what myself and Josh did, which was a shame, as I'm sure they would have both been very good at putting their hand to most things.
So when did you get your amateur jockey's licence?
When I turned 16, I was keen to get out there. I think I sat a GCSE paper, my English paper, in the morning, and then had my first ride at Brighton. My father was kind enough to give me an absolute steering job for a very important owner of ours, Richard Green, a horse that had proven himself around the track, Flying Spirit. He absolutely loved the place, and I knew how to ride the track. I'd had a lot of help from Ryan on where to go. I'd actually ridden work in the mornings on the racecourse as well, so I went out there very confident, and that was my first ride, and thankfully it was a winning one, but I would have done very well to have gotten that horse beat that day.
Now, probably your biggest victory was the Longines Ladies handicap on Captain Ramus in 2011. Does winning a race like that really rekindle and kickstart the fire to want to become a professional?
It kickstarts the ambition to go on and want to go out there and compete, but not to be a professional. No, for a start, being very practical, I'd always be too heavy to have been a female professional. I've never been that light. Obviously, there's a lot of help now with your diets and things like that, so I'm sure you could get guided to be at a lighter weight. But no, it was a very special win for me. It was a race that I think every amateur aspires to win, and then I was lucky enough to follow it up the following year on board Redvers, so I got a real taste for that race, and I've never felt more sick than when I came second in it, when I got stopped in running on a couple of occasions during the race, and it meant I didn't win, had to go down into second, and it was almost as if I'd never won that race before. I felt that gutted not to have won it a third time, but I was lucky enough to win it on a couple of occasions. Riding at Ascot's just absolutely brilliant. I don't think there's a better track in the world really to be able to compete at, so it's very lucky as an amateur that you get to go there and win some nice diamond watches as well, so that's always a bonus. But no, I think I've always been quite realistic, and being a competitive amateur was always very much my mindset, really.
It was quite well reported that you sort of called up Michelle Payne after she won, not called her up, but commented on her comments after she won the Melbourne Cup that racing is sexist, and you said that if a girl had proven ability, she'll get the rise. You still believe that's true?
Yeah, I do. I think more than ever, really. I think that it's been proven recently with the likes of Josephine Gordon. She's operating at the top level, and if you are good enough, trainers will give you rides. If you've got the right racing brain, if you can judge pace, if you've got the strength, if you're the full package and you're good enough, you'll get rides. So I thought when she won the race, good for her, and if she's felt that through her career the sport's been sexist against her, then individually that's I'm sure what she's come up against. But as a whole, and as a person that looks from the outside in or inside out, whatever, I don't think there is. I think if you're good enough, you will get there. I think the likes of Nina Carberry have proven that, Katie Walsh have proven that. I know they're both recently retired, but I think if you are good enough, you'll get where you want to be, and you will get opportunities. I think nowadays more than ever that things are better for a female when it becomes to being a jockey. So yeah, I stand by that. Michelle Payne was a terrific rider, and if she felt that on her own self, then I think that was a personal thing for her. So obviously can't disagree with her, but I'd probably rather have heard her appreciating the fact she just won a Melbourne Cup, other than sticking two fingers up to the guys that didn't support her, and to prove it for women. But I think if you're good enough, then you will get the rides, and she's not had the backing that I thought she would have done after winning a Melbourne Cup. So maybe she is right, but that's what she feels individually anyway.
Okay, you last hung up your saddle after a race in August 2017. Is that it? Have you retired from the saddle?
No, definitely haven't retired. Still riding out as much as I can for my father. I'm just trying to prioritise my career in the media. I've got a long way to go. I've got a lot to learn. And I think that it's hard to be focusing on race riding and doing everything as well as doing, a media career at the same time. And I'm relatively new to doing TV stuff, so I think that that's something I've got to improve on and show my dedication to.